People have a natural desire for order. We need to feel in control of this vast and frightening world. That is why we created history, systematized events by date, developed the laws of physics, and decided that now everything is known. We have built ourselves a cozy oasis of understandable rules and found peace. However, this foundation begins to crack when we encounter phenomena that do not fit into our rules. The main problem with modern science is that it has to look for the new, but it often finds itself hostage to the old. The scientific community simply rejects anything that goes beyond the familiar, anything that could shake the established picture of the world. There are so-called anomalous artifacts, objects or technologies that appear in places where their appearance seems impossible, or that are significantly ahead of their time by millennia. It's like finding a smartphone in a pharaoh's tomb or a lighter in a dinosaur fossil. 5 such amazing discoveries call into question all our ideas as recorded in history textbooks. They make us think that our knowledge is based on guesswork and that perhaps reality is not at all what we are used to perceiving it as. Imagine the most remote corners of the planet, impenetrable jungles or high mountains where the air is thin. It is there, in these extreme conditions, that mysterious stone faces are hidden. Scientists usually explain their appearance simply, the play of light and shadow. They claim that our brain tends to see faces everywhere, in clouds, in puddles, in cracks in the asphalt. This phenomenon is called pareidolia. It's a convenient explanation that allows them to take no action and sleep peacefully. As soon as the wind blew and the rain fell, the rock naturally turned into an image of a person. But if you look more closely and use a ruler, this theory falls apart. In dense forests and on deserted plateaus, there are rocks that look like perfect sculptures. The left and right halves of their faces are identical. Nature is not capable of such a thing. The wind blows without a specific direction. Water erodes stone where it is softer, not where it is needed to create beauty. But these statues are perfectly balanced. The eyes are at the same level, the nose is straight, and the lips are clearly defined. All this is done on a huge scale so that the face looks natural, even when viewed from below or from an airplane flying overhead. Such giants are found everywhere. Canada has home to the Guardian of the Wastelands, which can only be seen from a bird's-eye view. The Urals have their own stone statues. In the Amazon jungle, stern faces peek out from behind the vines. Even on Mars, there is the famous face, which for a long time was claimed to be nothing more than a hill and a bad photograph.
However, new, clear images have revealed details that could not have been created by the wind. The Marcahuasi Plateau in Peru deserves special attention. Located at an altitude of 4 kilometers, this place amazes with its sculptural mosaic, where each stone seems to have been created artificially. There you can see not only human faces of different races, which in itself is unusual for ancient America, but also figures of animals that have never been found in Peru: elephants, lions, camels. Researcher Daniel Russo, who devoted many years of his life to this place, believed that these figures are only visible on certain days of the year and when the sun is in a certain position. This means that ancient sculptors not only possessed the skill to work with stone, but also had a deep knowledge of astronomy and the play of light that surpasses our modern understanding. Official history is dealt another blow by our old acquaintance, the Great Sphinx in Egypt. We tend to believe that it was built by the pharaohs about 4,500 years ago. However, geologists, having studied the body of the Sphinx, discovered strange grooves. These are traces of erosion, but not caused by wind and sand as one might expect in the desert. Instead, they indicate the impact of water flows, powerful rainstorms.
The fact is that such heavy rains were observed in Egypt about 10 to 12,000 years ago, at the end of the Ice Age. If the Sphinx was eroded by rain, then it was already standing in its place at that time. This casts doubt on its construction during an era when historians believe that only primitive hunters lived in the Nile Valley. Looking at how badly time has scarred these stones, we can conclude that they are tens of thousands of years old. According to official history, in those days our ancestors hunted mammoths with sticks and lived in caves. It is unlikely that they could have built something like this. To carve such a face into the rock, it was necessary to cut away thousands of tons of stone. This is comparable to the construction of a skyscraper. This requires technology, engineers, and designs, not just a group of people with copper hammers. Another strange place is Göbekli Tepe. It is a giant temple built at a time when people had not yet invented the wheel and did not know how to cultivate wheat. This circumstance forces scientists to admit that ancient civilizations were not as primitive as previously thought. But the stone faces found at this site require even more advanced technology. Legends of various peoples, from the Indians to the Egyptians, tell that the ancients knew how to make stone as plastic as clay, using the juice of certain plants or special sound effects. There is not a single trace of a chisel on these statues. The stone is so smooth, as if it had been sculpted and then frozen in this form for eternity. And we, looking at them, cannot decipher the message they hold. In 1901, an event occurred that shocked historians. It all began like an exciting adventure novel. Greek fishermen engaged in sponge fishing were caught in a violent storm and were forced to seek refuge on the small island of Antikythera. Not wanting to sit idle, they decided to dive in this new place and discovered a shipwreck cemetery at the bottom of the sea. Among the jugs, statues, and coins, they came across a strange object, a shapeless piece of rusty, corroded wood and bronze. At first, they mistook it for trash, a piece of debris, and threw it into the museum courtyard. They forgot about it for a couple of years, but when the wood in which it was hidden dried out and crumbled, they discovered something amazing inside: gears. They named it the Antikythera mechanism. It was a real mechanical computer, already 2,000 years old. It determined the position of the sun and moon with incredible accuracy, as well as the movement of the planets, Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. Amazingly, it even took into account the irregularity of the moon's motion, which sometimes speeds up and sometimes slows down due to the peculiarities of its orbit. The mechanism used a complex system of gears with an offset center, an invention that European watchmakers only replicated in the 17th century. The problem is that there was simply no technical basis for creating such technologies at that time. It's like finding an iPhone in a medieval castle. Such complex mechanisms with dozens of perfectly fitted gears require the use of machine tools. It is impossible to cut such a thing out by hand on your knee. You need lathes, high-precision measuring instruments, and a theory of mechanics that did not exist in the books of that time. Thus, it turns out that in ancient times there was a powerful science, which then disappeared for some reason, and humanity plunged into the darkness of ignorance for a long time, forgetting its former knowledge. There is another mystery: the London hammer. It was discovered in Texas in the 1930s. At first glance, it is an ordinary hammer with a wooden handle. However, what is unusual is that it is embedded in stone, and not just any stone, but limestone that is about 140 million years old. This is the time of the dinosaurs. The wooden handle inside the stone is already beginning to turn into coal, like ancient wood, and on the outside it has fossilized. Analysis of the metal revealed something very interesting. When scientists in the laboratory cut into the hammerhead, they were in for a shock. It was an iron alloy of such purity that we can now only obtain through complex electrolytic purification. It contained no carbon, always present in steel, and no harmful impurities, but it did contain unusual chlorine additives that prevented corrosion. This hammer has been stored in a museum with humid air for many decades, and not a single drop of rust has formed on the scratch.
In the age of dinosaurs, who was capable of smelting such iron? Consider, for example, the Baghdad battery. It is a clay jug that is 2 millennia old. Inside it is a copper tube and an iron rod, all covered with bitumen for insulation. Modern experts have created an exact replica, filled it with grape vinegar, and, surprisingly, the device produced a current. Half a volt, but still a current. If you connect 10 such jugs, you can get significant power. However, skeptics argue maybe they stored scrolls there. But why insulate scrolls with bitumen and copper? It is more logical to assume that ancient jewelers used electricity for electroplating, applying a thin layer of gold to cheap figurines. This explains why there are so many perfectly gilded ancient objects in museums, and why there are so few traces of the gilding technology itself. In 1513, Turkish Admiral Piri Reis created a map of the world. He admitted that he did not take any measurements himself, but only redrew it from very old maps that he had inherited as trophies after naval battles. Some of them dated back to the time of Alexander the Great. The map, drawn on gazelle skin, has survived to this day. After studying it, modern researchers were amazed. Antarctica was located in that place. Officially, this icy continent was only discovered in the 19th century, 300 years after the admiral created his map. In 1820, the Russian expedition of Bellingshausen and Lazarev recorded the ice of Antarctica. And on Piri Reis's map, it was already depicted, connected to South America by an isthmus. However, that is not the most surprising thing. The map of Antarctica shows a landscape without ice, rivers, mountain ranges, valleys. Until the middle of the 20th century, this seemed impossible, like science fiction. But when scientists used seismic exploration and illuminated the Antarctic ice sheet with sound, they discovered that the same relief was indeed hidden under kilometers of ice. Where the Turkish admiral drew it, mountains rise and rivers flow in the same directions. According to scientific research, Antarctica was ice-free about 6,000 years ago, and possibly even earlier. This implies that in ancient times, when, according to the official version of history, people lived in animal skins and made sea voyages to the South Pole, someone was already drawing up detailed maps of this region. At the same time, these people had instruments for accurately determining coordinates, something that humanity was unable to do until the 18th century, when the accurate chronometer was invented. One of the features of the map is that it looks as if the Earth was photographed from space. The projection of the map resembles a satellite image of Cairo. The distortions of the continents perfectly match space photographs. How could the ancients have created such a map without airplanes or rockets? There are other maps, such as the map of Orontius Veneris, where Antarctica is also depicted as flourishing, with rivers and mountains. Where did they get this knowledge in the Middle Ages? Are we too proud of our achievements and fail to notice that we are simply repeating what has already been done before? The African Dogon tribe, living in mud huts in Mali, possesses amazing knowledge despite the absence of telescopes. In the 1930s, when French ethnographers visited them, the Dogon told them about astonishing facts about space. They claimed that Sirius is not a single star, but consists of two, the main star and the small but incredibly heavy star Sirius B,
which orbits the main star and is invisible to the naked eye.
Known as Po-To, it was called the heaviest substance in the universe. It was only in the second half of the 20th century that modern astronomy confirmed this ancient version. Sirius B is a white dwarf, the density of which is such that a regular matchbox would weigh tons. The Dogon, as it turned out, knew the star's rotation period, 50 years, and even held celebrations every 50 years in honor of this cycle. They were also aware of Saturn's rings and Jupiter's 4 largest moons. Where did this information come from? The priests claim that it was passed on to them by the Nomos, teachers who descended from the sky in an ark, which, according to them, rotated, raised dust, and produced a terrifying hum. The description of the landing of this ship among a wild tribe is so detailed and accurate that it causes a feeling of discomfort. Mysteries lie not only in the world around us, but also within ourselves.
In our DNA, which is our internal code, the instructions for building our bodies, we are surprisingly similar to chimpanzees, with a minimal difference in genes, only 2%. It is these 2% that determine that we, humans, build cities, compose symphonies, and launch rockets, while our monkey relatives remain in the trees. About 200,000 years ago, an unusual phenomenon occurred with our ancestors. Their brains began to grow at an incredible rate. The volume of the skull increased threefold in a relatively short period of time. This happened very quickly compared to the usual pace of evolution. After all, evolution usually proceeds slowly over millions of years, with gradual, barely noticeable changes in species. But here there was a sharp leap, and intelligent humans appeared. We lost our fur, our larynx transformed, allowing us to speak, and our skeleton was restructured.
Scientists have discovered special sections in human DNA called accelerated evolution regions, or HAR. These regions have remained unchanged in all mammals, from mice to chimpanzees, for millions of years. They are highly conservative. In humans, however, these zones have undergone rapid and dramatic changes. For example, the HAR1 section, which is responsible for the development of the cerebral cortex, the part of the brain responsible for our thoughts, differs by only 2 letters of code in chickens and chimpanzees, even though their evolutionary paths diverged 300 million years ago. Between chimpanzees and humans, separated by only 6 million years of evolution, the difference is 118 letters. It seems as if someone interfered with our code and rewrote it by hand. It's as if a programmer took the monkey's source code, opened it, and made changes to create a rational being. Another mystery is our second chromosome. All of our ape ancestors have 24 pairs of chromosomes, while humans have 23. What happened to one pair? It turns out that our second chromosome was formed by the fusion of 2 ape chromosomes into one. Moreover, this happened so neatly that the extra sections at the fusion site were deactivated, while the functional ones remained active. The chance that a random mutation would occur on its own and give rise to viable offspring capable of populating the entire planet is extremely low. This is frightening, as it suggests that our appearance was not accidental. Perhaps we are the result of an experiment. One of the discoverers of DNA, Nobel Prize winner Francis Crick, suggested that life on Earth could have been brought from outside. In his opinion, our genetic code is too complex and perfect to have arisen spontaneously in a primitive puddle. Ancient myths tell the same story, only in simpler terms. The Sumerians have a legend recorded on clay tablets that the Anunnaki gods, tired of working on Earth, mining for gold, decided to create helpers for themselves.
Enki, the chief scientist of the gods, took the essence of God, that is, DNA, and combined it with earthly clay, that is, the cells of an earthly monkey. After many failed attempts, which resulted in the creation of monsters, Adam, man, was finally created. Let's imagine that these tales are translated into the language of modern science. The result would be a description of laboratory experiments in genetic engineering and cloning. Perhaps our evolution is not just a coincidence, but the result of someone's well-thought-out project. The ancient builders left us a mystery that we still cannot solve.
In Lebanon, in the Temple of Baalbek, there are trilithons, huge stone blocks that form its foundation. Each of these stones weighs 800 tons. Imagine the weight of 500 cars or 3 Boeing airplanes combined into one monolith. Even the most powerful modern cranes are incapable of lifting such a weight. They simply cannot withstand it and will break. There are only a couple of cranes on the planet capable of performing such a task, but it takes months to assemble them on site. Ancient people extracted these stones from a quarry, transported them several kilometers, lifted them to a height of 7 meters, and built them into a wall. They built them so tightly that even a razor blade cannot fit between them. But how? The official version mentions slaves, ropes, and wooden rollers. However, engineers have calculated that it would take 40,000 people to move one such block by hand. Try to imagine this crowd.
They would not be able to fit around the stone. They would be pushing each other. They would have no place to brace themselves. Under such weight, the wooden rollers would not withstand the load and would immediately turn into splinters. In the same quarry lay another huge stone, the stone of the pregnant woman. It weighs over 1,000 tons. It was cut and processed, but for some reason was not used. It seemed as if the builders had simply left for a short time to have lunch and never returned. So there must have been another technology. Legends from different cultures, from biblical tales to Mayan myths, mention sound. The walls of Jericho collapsed under the sound of trumpets. Egyptian priests allegedly made stones fly by striking them with metal sticks. Travelers reported that Tibetan monks, using drums and trumpets in a certain rhythm, could lift huge boulders up a mountain. Could these really be just fairy tales?
In modern laboratories, scientists have learned to make tiny foam balls and water droplets float in the air using sound waves. This phenomenon is known as acoustic levitation. The physics behind it is based on the principle that sound is a wave that exerts pressure. With the right choice of frequency and sound power, the force of gravity can be compensated for. Could it be that ancient people possessed the secret of sound that we have lost? A modern example of such a mystery is the Coral Castle in Florida. It was built at the beginning of the 20th century by one man, Latvian Edward Leedskalnin. He was short in stature, only 5 feet tall and weighing just 99 pounds. But it was he who, alone and at night, dragged and lifted multi-ton coral blocks to build his castle. No one ever witnessed this process.
When asked how he did it, he replied, "I learned the secret of how the Egyptians built the pyramids." In the workshop where he died, no lifting cranes were found, only unusual devices with magnets and wires. Could he really have revived the ancient technology of anti-gravity? Let's consider the Great Pyramid of Giza. It is built of granite containing a lot of quartz. Quartz is capable of generating electricity under pressure, piezoelectric effect. The pyramid is constructed in such a way that it emits a hum at a certain frequency, like a giant musical instrument. It is tuned to the vibration frequency of the planet Earth itself. Some researchers believe that pyramids are not intended for burial at all. No one was buried in them. There are no frescoes praising the pharaoh as in other tombs. These are giant machines, complex technical structures. Perhaps they were power stations that supplied energy without the use of wires, or seismic stabilizers.
But when we look at them, we see only a pile of stones because we have not yet reached the level of understanding their designs. We are accustomed to thinking that the Wright brothers were the first to lift man into the air more than 100 years ago. But archaeological finds provide us with artifacts that give us reason to believe that the sky was conquered long before us. Gold figurines over 1,000 years old have been found in the burial sites of the Quimbaya culture in Colombia. Archaeologists have dubbed them ritual birds or insects. However, if you look closely, they have nothing in common with birds. They have a vertical keel on their tail, unlike the horizontal keel of birds, and delta-shaped wings located under the body, reminiscent of the wings of modern fighter jets. They have no feathers, eyes, or legs. At the same time, the figurines have something very similar to a cockpit and elevators. Two German model aircraft builders decided to test their hypothesis.
They created an exact enlarged copy of such a figurine, installed a motor and propeller on it, and this model bird took off. It demonstrated perfect aerodynamic qualities. It glided, performed maneuvers, and stayed confidently in the air. This means that the ancient Indians who lived in the jungle had a knowledge of aerodynamics that surpassed that of engineers at the beginning of the 20th century. But where did they get these shapes? From birds? But birds do not have such shapes. Or maybe they saw flying machines in the sky that became an example for them. In India, on the other side of the world, ancient texts have been preserved, the Vedas and the Mahabharata epic. They tell of Vimanas, the flying chariots of the gods. However, they are not presented as fairy tale flying carpets, but are described in detail as complex technical devices. The texts specify the materials from which they should be built so that they can withstand high temperatures during flight.
The Mahabharata describes various types of Vimanas. Some are designed to fly only in the air, while others are capable of diving underwater or even going into space. There are even texts that describe the design of the engine. They mention mercury, which must be heated to generate a vortex that propels the machine forward. For a long time, such descriptions were considered fiction. However, NASA recently conducted experiments with mercury-ion engines. It turned out that the principle of their operation is valid. The texts also describe how Vimanas fought in the sky, launching arrows that shone like thousands of suns and destroying entire cities. The description of these explosions is frightening in its similarity to nuclear strikes. People's hair and nails fell out, food became inedible, and survivors threw themselves into the water, trying to wash away the ashes of death. Was our past really much more technologically advanced than we imagine?
Perhaps it was not dragons that flew over ancient India or South America, but flying machines made of metal and alloys, piloted by pilots who knew the secrets of anti-gravity and jet propulsion. This is only a small part of what is hidden from our view. Stone faces in the jungle, ancient computers at the bottom of the sea, maps of the Ice Age, mysterious features of our DNA, singing stones and golden airplanes, all these are pieces of a huge puzzle. They hint that human history is not a straight path from primitivism to iPhones. Most likely, we are not the first intelligent beings here. And our civilization may not be the only peak of evolution, but rather another step in its development. Perhaps there was once a great global civilization that was destroyed by a terrible catastrophe, and we live on its ruins, like children playing in a sandbox on the ruins of a palace, trying to unravel its mysteries.
Instead of admitting its ignorance, Science tries to come up with simple explanations or hides discoveries in dark boxes. But facts are inexorable. If a theory does not agree with the facts, then it must be revised. Perhaps only when we stop thinking of ourselves as the wisest beings in the universe will the real discovery of our past begin. Then we will recognize that the ancients may have possessed knowledge that is inaccessible to us. The door to real history has only been slightly opened, and behind it lies a world full of mysteries and lost technologies.